Hey mommies, how are you? So Isaac is now reaching the 6 month stage. I didn't kind of want to get to this point yet because I know that we have to start solids now, and my life is just so much easier when I don't have to worry about heating stuff up or preparing stuff. I just love the fact that with breastfeeding, you have so much freedom and so much, I don't know, less stuff to do, I think, and less stuff to think about. But we are there, so I did decide that I wanted to start to do it. I want to start introducing him to solids and things like that, because I had someone before mention that I should start it at 4 months, and I was like, no way, I'm not gonna do that. I read a lot about that, and I've had a lot of people that have had adverse reactions happen when they introduce food too early. So for me, it was definitely a no-no. But I just wanted to make a clear point because it's something that I've read a lot about and I've started to understand a lot. Because we start to think that at 6 months, okay, you introduce food and that's it, like food kind of takes over. And it's not really like that at all. I mean, it's really, really important that as breastfeeding moms or moms in general, really, we understand that when you start to introduce solids, which usually happens around 6 months, but doesn't have to happen at 6 months. The baby can actually survive and be nourished and thrive perfectly well just on breast milk up until a year. And most babies, in fact, don't start becoming interested in food until around 9 months. So it's completely normal and it's completely fine. You don't have to start right away at 6 months. It's really up to you. But I just wanted to bring about a little bit about pros and cons and things to take into consideration and to remember when you're going to start this whole part of introducing solids. So the very first thing to remember is that solid foods are just supposed to complement with your breast milk or your breastfeeding or nursing, okay? So that's the number one thing to remember. And remember to watch your baby and not so much the calendar, like bing, 6 months, that's it, introduce food or solids. It doesn't really work that way. The best thing to do is really watch that your baby is ready. So for example, some of those things are, does your baby sit very well? You know, can they hold their posture? Do you see that, for example, that they crave food? So like if you're eating, if they're trying to reach out for it, or they're making like faces or movements with their tongue and their mouth, things like that, you start to see that the baby's ready. Sometimes it might take longer than 6 months. And something else to consider is if you have been suggested to start solids at around 4 months, really reconsider it, because most babies' digestive system at that age, between 4 to 6 months, is still very, very immature. So you just have to be careful with that because it can have an adverse reaction with your baby too. And sometimes introducing solids too early can cause like allergies and things like that later on in life. So those are things to consider. Something else is like in regards to how much you should be feeding your baby. That really depends, but just kind of as a guideline or as a general rule, once you start to introduce the solids, if you do start to do it at 6 months, you should only really be feeding your baby once per day, okay? And a very small amount, like maybe 1 or 2 tablespoons, that should be it. And you should it's really important, just like with breastfeeding, that baby, if your baby has been exclusively breastfed for 6 months, they know how to regulate their intake of food. So it's the same thing with solids. So you would just offer the baby the food, and then if they start to refuse, like spit it out or anything like that, then you definitely want to make sure that you're not feeding the baby anymore. And something else that you can do, which is really helpful, is make sure that you give the baby milk first. So you nurse your baby first, and then you give the solids. And then that way you make sure that the breast milk is the primary source of nutrition. And then really what the solids are doing are just getting baby acquainted with foods, with solids, with textures, with flavors, things like that. So your breast milk should be the primary source of nourishment. In regards to introducing foods around the 6th point mark, how interested are you in the screen? Is also to take into consideration is what you're giving your baby, okay? Because a lot of people ask me that, what should I give the baby first? Like what type of foods? And it really doesn't matter. It's really kind of up to you what you want to give. if you give cereal first, or if you give like fruits first or vegetable first, or what types of fruits or vegetables first. What I would suggest is definitely when you're trying feeding your baby, you choose foods that are very, very nutritious for them, so that you're giving the baby foods like, that are rich in iron and rich in protein and things like that. So think about maybe like lentils,